let's dive right into this one, because Numbers chapter 20 is honestly a heavily transitional and pretty emotional chapter. In this explainer, we're going to walk through the text step by step. We'll be looking at a series of massive shifts in leadership, some really deep, painful losses, and the incredibly strict consequences that follow a major misstep. We're keeping it simple, focusing strictly on the plain meaning of the text to understand exactly what happens to the Israelites at this really critical crossroads in the wilderness.
Welcome to the Pardis channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 20 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the context of arriving in Kadesh. Then, we'll tackle the water crisis, followed by Edom's rejection of Israel. After that, we'll cover the death of Aaron, and we'll wrap it all up with some key ideas and practical lessons.
Section 1. Context. Arriving in Kadesh.
So looking at verse 1, the text gives us a very specific time marker. It's the first month. The whole Israelite community arrives at the desert of Zin. Now this is a really harsh, dry, unforgiving region. They settle in a place called Kadesh. Kadesh is a Hebrew name that actually means holy or sanctified. But right out of the gate, the narrative hits us with this incredibly profound sorrow. In this very place, Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister, dies and is buried. So right from the opening sense of the chapter, the leadership is plunged into grief. The people have just lost this foundational, stabilizing figure who had been with them literally since the exodus from Egypt. It's a heavy start.
Section 2. Walkthrough. The water crisis.
Now watch how fast scarcity turns that collective grief into a full-blown rebellion. Verse 2 paints a stark picture. There is absolutely no water for the community. And how do the people react? They gather in fierce, direct opposition against Moses and Aaron. They are quarreling bitterly. They actually say to Moses, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord." They accuse him of dragging them out into this desert just to let them and their livestock die of thirst. And then, down in verse 5, they express this intense longing for their past in Egypt, completely glossing over the horrific reality of their previous slavery. They complain, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines, or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." You can really feel the panic and the anger bubbling over here.
Faced with this intense, pretty scary opposition, verses 6 through 8 show Moses and Aaron walking away from the angry mob. They go straight to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fall face down. And right there, the glory of the Lord appears to them. God steps in and responds with extremely specific, step-by-step instructions. Number 1, take the staff. Number 2, you and Aaron gather the assembly together. And number 3, and this is absolutely crucial, God says speak to that rock before their eyes and it will pour out its water. It's that simple. By just doing this, God assures them they will bring enough water out of the rock for the entire community and all their livestock to drink.
But in verses 9 through 11, things go terribly wrong. We see this tragic contrast between what God said and what actually happens. Moses takes the staff from the Lord's presence, exactly as he was told. He and Aaron gather the assembly in front of the rock. But instead of simply speaking to the rock, Moses just snaps. In a moment of deep, overwhelming frustration, he lashes out. He yells at the crowd, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" And then, instead of using his words, Moses raises his arm and strikes the rock with his staff, not once, but twice. Now, water does gush out abundantly. The community drinks, the livestock drink, but that clear, specific, divine instruction, the command to merely speak to the rock, that was completely violated.
Section 3. Consequence. The waters of Meribah.
So let's look directly at the original text for verses 12 and 13. This is where we see the exact, unchanging decree that comes down on the two great leaders of Israel as a direct result of their actions at that rock. Verse 12 delivers a consequence that is just staggering. The Lord says to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Wow. Think about the sheer weight of that for a second. Because they struck the rock in anger, instead of following the exact instruction to speak, they failed to sanctify God, meaning they failed to demonstrate his ultimate holiness and power in front of the people. And because of that one failure, their ultimate life's mission, the entire reason they've been leading the Israelites all these years, is revoked. They are not going into the promised land.
Verse 13 gives a permanent name to this tragic location. It says, "These were the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord and where he showed himself holy among them." The Hebrew word Meribah literally translates to quarreling or strife, so the name itself serves as a memorial. It forever marks this painful, tragic conflict between the people, the leaders, and God.
Section 4. Walkthrough. Edom rejects Israel. Moving right along to verses 14 through 21, the text details a really fascinating diplomatic exchange. The Israelites need to keep moving, so Moses sends messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Moses uses this highly respectful, brotherly approach. He points out their shared history, calling Israel Edom's brother, which is a clear nod to their shared ancestry through the brothers Jacob and Esau. He recounts all their hardships in Egypt and God's deliverance. Then he makes a very polite request. Please let us pass through your country. We will travel along the king's highway and not turn to the right or to the left. They even promise to pay for any water they drink. It's super reasonable, right? But the king of Edom's response is incredibly aggressive. Edom answers, "You may not pass through here. If you try, we will march out and attack you with the sword." Israel tries one more time, reiterating that they just want to pass through peacefully on foot, but Edom flat out refuses again, and this time they actually march out against them with a large, heavily armed army. Faced with this absolute wall of hostility, Israel makes a choice. They simply turn away.
Section 5. Walkthrough. Aaron's death.
Now we reach verses 22 to 24. The whole community sets out from Kadesh and arrives at Mount Hor, right near the border of Edom. And it's here that God speaks to Moses and Aaron with some heavy news. God declares that Aaron will now be gathered to his people. Now this is a really beautiful, poetic Hebrew euphemism for death, meaning he's going to peacefully rejoin his ancestors. But God explicitly states the reason for this timing. Aaron will not enter the Promised Land because both of them rebelled against God's command at the waters of Meribah. So Aaron's physical journey in this world ends right here at Mount Hor. Verses 25 to 28 describe how this leadership transition actually takes place. And it's deeply methodical and profoundly solemn. God instructs Moses to take Aaron and his son Eleazar, by the way, Eleazar's name fittingly means God has helped, up Mount Hor. Step 1. Moses removes Aaron's priestly garments. Step 2. Moses takes those garments and puts them on Eleazar. This physical act is huge. It represents the formal, visible transfer of the high priesthood from father to son, right in the sight of the whole community. And then step 3, Aaron dies there on top of the mountain. Afterward, Moses and Eleazar walk back down the mountain together. Just the two of them.
We wrap up the narrative portion of the chapter in verse 29. When the community finally learns that Aaron has died, the text tells us that the entire house of Israel mourned for him for 30 days. This isn't just a brief pause for a quick memorial. This is a period of total standstill. The whole camp comes to a complete halt on their physical journey to honor the passing of their very first high priest.
Section 6. Key ideas and lessons.
Let's distill all of this down. The primary key idea here is the massive structural transition of leadership. Think about it. In just one single chapter, the entire generation of leaders who brought the people out of Egypt is systematically stepping down. Miriam dies at the very beginning, Aaron dies at the end, transferring his authority to his son Eleazar, and Moses, well, he just received the divine decree that his own end is now in sight. He too will not cross into the Promised Land. This one chapter fundamentally reshapes the entire leadership structure of the Israelites moving forward.
Now for our practical lessons. Practical lesson 1, the severe danger of acting out in anger. We see this brilliantly illustrated when Moses strikes the rock. God gave him a very clear, simple instruction: speak to the rock. But Moses was so deeply worn down by the constant bitter complaining of the people that he let his emotions hijack his actions. He lashed out, he called the people rebels, and he struck the rock. It's a powerful reminder for us today that emotional reactionary decisions, especially when we're exhausted and frustrated, can lead to incredibly costly mistakes. Practical lesson 2 focuses on accountability. God held Moses and Aaron to an incredibly high standard. I mean, Moses was the greatest prophet, yet a single public failure to trust and sanctify God carried a strict, unyielding consequence. This really demonstrates the profound responsibility that comes with being a leader. It tells us that the closer you are to the top and the more visible you are to your community, the heavier the burden of accountability becomes. Leadership is not a free pass, it's a higher standard.
Finally, practical lesson 3, handling rejection gracefully. When the king of Edom met Israel's polite, brotherly diplomacy with the threat of a sword and a massive marching army, Israel had a choice. They absolutely could have fought. But instead, as the text simply puts it, Israel turned away from them. They chose to reroute their journey rather than engage in a bloody, unnecessary war with a relative nation. Sometimes, making the active, strategic choice to turn your back on a forced conflict is the most mature, powerful thing you can do.
So,
As we leave the Israelites mourning at the foot of Mount Hor, we really have to ask ourselves, when the wilderness of life strips away everything familiar, how do we handle the pressure without striking the rock? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.